I remember the first time ever looking back in the wake of my ship and seeing all those, the whiteness and the foam, and I said, that's white because it all consists of bubbles. And I said, how many bubbles am I looking at? And I find I'm looking at fantastic numbers of bubbles. Here comes in this way. Look at all this whiteness, all those bubbles. Beautiful, beautiful bubbles, every one of them. I said, now, I've been taught at school, in order to be able to design, because a bubble is a sphere, you have to use pi. And the number pi, 31416, on and on goes the number. We find that it cannot be resolved, called transcendental irrational. So I said, every time nature's making one of those bubbles, how many places she carry out pi before she discovers you can't resolve it? And at what point does nature decide to make a fake bubble? I said, I don't think nature's turning out any fake bubbles. I think that nature's not using pi. So this made me start looking for ways in which nature did contrive all of her menstruation, her spontaneous associations, without using such numbers. And I'm quite confident I really have found her coordinate system where she doesn't have any irrationals whatsoever, because in the chemistry you find her associating H2O, not H pi O, always whole rational low order numbers, and all of associating dissociating.
Into triangular forms, they could hold up things as well or even better than stone could, and with a lot less mass, a lot less material. So what they did was, and characteristics and how atoms were arranged in molecules in different kinds of metals and in different kinds of mixed metals or alloys, the wires were able to get thinner and thinner. Time, bridges have gotten longer and longer and longer over bigger rivers, over bigger bodies of water, over bigger canyons. And yet, as they've gotten longer, they've gotten stronger, and the fraction of the materials and a fraction of the energy and a fraction of the water, that we have that knowledge. dMass is about learning to apply these principles of mimicking the way nature solves problems and applying them to all aspects of our lives in order to reduce the total amount of mass that is invested in producing the wealth and the progress.
Concentrated masses of people, continuous nomadism, show us the possibility of an urban life without the emergence of three-dimensional structures as a basis. Morphological structures visualize the terms of functional exploitation. Manhattan Island, divided according to a Cartesian grid, stands as an example of homogeneous initial utilization of territory. Networks of services and communications are the means for the use of the land. The cities stand as the nuts of the network. We can imagine always larger zones of the Earth being developed, homogeneous and inhabitable. We can imagine a network of energy and information that makes life possible according to new models. The grid, when activated, creates a situation of Cartesian plan, in which every point is described by the intersection of two straight lines, which is, of course, to be understood not only in the physical sense, but as a visual verbal metaphor for an ordered and rational distribution of resources. grid can assume different forms, the first being a linear development. The others include different planimetrical developments, with the possibility of covering different and gradually increasing parts of the inhabitable areas. We can also imagine the grid invisible, just individualized by the equidistant knot points. Those points constitute ideal universal points, which satisfy all the primary needs. A new mankind, free from induced needs, can survive with the help of the grid and the plugs. A new society based no longer on work, nor on power, nor on violence, but on unalienated human relationships. Our elementary requirements can be satisfied by a highly sophisticated, miniaturized technique. A greater ability to think and the integral use of our psychic potential will then be the foundation and the reason for a life free from want. There will be no further need for cities or castles. There will be no further reason for roads or squares. Every point will be the same as any other. So, having chosen a random point on the map, we'll be able to say, my house will be here for 3 days, or 2 months, or 10 years. Mrs. Jones would certainly have no intention of doing without her vacuum cleaner, her electric iron, her washing machine and fridge, books, costume jewelry, dolls, and clothes. She can just take whatever she likes, or rather, equip a happy island for herself with all her goods. The only problem is that the sea has receded all around, and the island is sticking up in the middle of a plain without any messages in bottles. Look at that distant mountain. What can you see? Is that the place to go to? Or is it the only limit of the inhabitable? It's both the one and the other. Since contradiction no longer exists, it's only a case of being complementary.
Ecological pattern was predicated very much, as with the wolf, on his ability to move about with his legs. We'll recognize that the human being has a very different ecological pattern from that of a tree. A tree has roots and cannot move around. Perception of the repeated patterns and realization that it can externalize those patterns. And what man did in order to be able to externalize them then was to organize the environment in the following way. The environment was essentially energy.
Metaphor for how they saw themselves as architects, little ants in this little plastic structure. And the ant farm said, no, that's a lot of shit. We have to take the power out of the hands of the planners. We have to break the plastic of the ant farm and set the ants free.
Behold, people emerge from the earth through the openings in the submerged work of architecture. It really was a house for the new golden age. There were no angry words to be heard there, nor violent noises. The music was pleasant and continuous, but there were also long pauses of silence.